At the start of World War II, Japan had the best pilot training program in the world, particularly when it came to their naval aviators. Their training program was rigorous, thorough, intense, and above all, highly selective. The Japanese hoped that in a war with another industrial power, their forces would be able to deliver a knockout blow early on. Japan was weak industrially, compared to the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and even France. This was viewed as a necessity. They gambled that by focusing on quality over quantity, they'd be able to achieve a decisive victory early in the war, and negotiate for peace from a position of strength. This plan allowed them to achieve stunning victories initially, but as the war dragged on, and the Allies refused to concede, attrition took its toll and whittled down the highly skilled air fleets of the Japanese Empire. In fact, the thoroughness of the Japanese flight training program was one of their strengths, but also a weakness. An extensive pilot training program necessarily requires logging many flight hours, and keeping planes flying requires significant amounts of oil. Japan's reserves were limited. They imported about 80% of their oil from the United States alone. Given that the direction of Japanese foreign policy determined that the United States was their most likely enemy, this did not bode well for the empire. In the beginning, training was only open to graduates of the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy in Itajima, Hiroshima. In March of 1914, it was extended to include non-commissioned officers, and in May of 1920, it was expanded again to include enlisted men. These expansions were deemed necessary because the program wasn't turning out enough men. Pilots were given different titles based on the track they used to get their wings. The Japanese Naval Academy graduates were the most prized and received the most thorough training. Something else that they did to create a larger air force was to establish the Air Reserve Student Program in November of 1934. This created a path for college students to join the Japanese Air Arms. Still, the number of students that passed were low. The first graduating class had only 5 men. The 8th graduating class in 1941 had 48 men. This worked in peacetime, but a major war was different. China didn't have a significant air service, but the United States did. About 2 years before Pearl Harbor, the Japanese began seriously considering a war with the United States, but they made no significant change to their pilot training program. In the first year of the Pacific War, the average Japanese pilot had seen twice as many hours in the air as their American counterparts. However, by 1942, attrition had taken its toll. Japan had faced enormous losses, and substantial amounts of American pilots had received experience against the best aviators in the world. The Americans were also turning out more pilots than the Japanese by Pearl Harbor. By necessity, Japan loosened its standards for training as the war continued. By 1945, Japanese naval aviators had gone from 500 hours to 275 hours. Their army counterparts had gone from 400 hours to 130 hours. That's on average. Some pilots were sent out with as little as 40 hours under their belts. Japanese pilots tended to rack up high amounts of kills, not just because of the thoroughness of their training early on, but because they tended to keep their pilots fighting until death. The Americans, on the other hand, would cycle their pilots in and out of the front lines, so experienced pilots could be sent to flight schools back home to share their first-hand experience with newer recruits. By the end of the war, the Americans not only had better trained pilots than the Japanese, they were better equipped and more numerous. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Have a nice day.